Hi, I'm Laura.
Hi, I'm Deanne.
And I'm Philippe.
And welcome to our Lymond book club. We are reading Pawn and Frankincense by Dorothy Dunnett. And we are going to cover chapters 22, 23, and 24. I will lead the discussion, but before we dive in, any overall thoughts on these chapters that you guys want to share?
What an adventure. And I was not at all surprised that it ended in disaster because there was no way that everybody was getting away scot-free at this point. So
yeah, I agree. It was just too early in the book. And like, even from the beginning of that last chapter, when I think Karedin is sort of the first one they rescue, I'm like, this is not going to end well at all.
Yeah, I was like, this is too easy. Things are going way too smoothly. No way. And then they mentioned something about like bribing people. And I'm like, oh man, there's other people involved. Gabriel definitely knows. There's no way.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting the Mikhail thing though. I'm sad. Like I really was suspicious of him at the beginning. And then I thought, oh, maybe he's on the, like, I was kind of glad that he seemed sort of redeemed and now he seems like a scumbag. So
we can talk about it when we get to that chapter, but I almost feel like he's doing it for what he thinks are the right reasons, but I don't think he understands the stakes, and I don't think he understands how evil Gabriel is. Or maybe he does and I just missed that completely. So
I don't know. I think that's giving him more credit. Maybe he's a triple agent, he's doing something else, but I don't know. I'm not happy with him right now.
I mean, I'm not happy with him, but I don't know yet if I can completely fault him. Because I mean, Jarrett's done some pretty awful, stupid stuff, thinking he was going and doing the right thing. He's usually idiotic about it. So.
Also, why is Onofrian still running around now that we know he's a traitor? Like, what's up with that?
Because I don't think Lymond wants to. That's still a card that he holds. I don't think he wants Gabriel to know that he knows that there's a crooked person in his midst. So, and maybe he's holding that card tight to use it against him after the point we've read.
Maybe, but I mean, it would seem kind of odd. Like, Lymond obviously knows he's addicted to opium, and he also obviously knows that he didn't do it to himself. So, I mean, how do you, like, I think Gabriel knows that he was betrayed by someone, because he obviously was. So I don't know. We'll see.
I don't know. Maybe Lymond is using that to feed Gabriel false information.
Maybe, but I just think it's kind of obvious that he's been caught. Like, so if I was Gabriel, I would assume Onofrian was burned, because who else would it be?
True.
Yeah. So I don't know. We'll see.
Would Gabriel tell Onofrian that, and would Onofrian figure that out on his own?
Figure out what on his own?
That he'd been compromised.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Gabriel would care to tell him. Like, why you just let him swing in the wind? But
yeah, I don't think they have like physical in-person contacts. I think it's all through messages and secrets, and sort of like that coded message that he was sending to Marino Donati with like the wax seal that you had to burn in order to get the correct stuff out. It's all very clandestine, or at least in my imagination it is. I also really kind of enjoyed the denouement, shall we say, of finding out what the hell Marta and Gautier are up to.
Oh, that was fun.
I did not see that one coming. And it was really cool. It's kind of like this whole chapter, we get this sort of like Indiana Jones vibe back, which I've noticed a lot in these chapters. Of course, this book was written well before Indiana Jones, so we could say Indiana Jones was sort of.
Well, it's that Saturday morning serial, like Saturday double feature movie feel, with the adventure and the Curse of the Mummy or the Lost Golden Treasure, Yeah,
I think they were pulling from the same sources, probably. But yeah, it feels so Indiana Jones with like the hidden treasure and like the archaeological exploration to finding it through the ruins, and even the whole argument like this belongs in a museum where people can study it.
Yes, it belongs museum.
I mean, it does.
There's so many points in this book, and this chapter was definitely one of them, where I just want to see the movie. You know, I just want to see, like, you can just imagine like the filming of this, you know, the dark water and the you know, like the light from the torch sort of bouncing off these, you know, bricks and stone and carvings, and the boat sliding through the water, and then coming across this room with the treasure, and like it just it seems so cinematic.
And of course, there's so many clues that now make sense that I would not have been. I don't think it's. I don't know if anybody would have been able to put all of these pieces together to come to this conclusion. But if you go back, like there's so many things that they've talked about before that come back in this moment. Like when they were riding towards Constantinople and somebody pointed out, oh, that's where they get the snow that comes down the mountain that they use for Suleiman, and the pigeons coming, all of those notes, and like how Pierre Gilles was talking about how he lost his notes, like that was all established and set up by Dorothy Dunnett, which of course.
And she mentions multiple times about the underwater like system and how that was like so ingenious and engineered and all of that. And that was mentioned several times. But yeah, I didn't pick up on anything until Marta came into the room to talk to Jarrett, and she was dirty. And I was like, why is she dirty? Like, what has she been digging? And then she says she has a client. I'm like, no, she doesn't. She's really dirty. So, like, it was that point, which was, you know, like a page before we figure it out. So,
well, I initially, before reading the rest of that chapter, when she came out dirty, I was like, oh, they're digging. And I was like, oh my God, they're digging a tunnel into Topkapi Palace.
That's what I thought too. I was like, oh, they actually on the good side, they're doing some sort of escape tunnel.
Yeah.
That was really dumb. Like,
Okay.
I don't know why I thought that, but.
Although I wouldn't be surprised if these tunnels do come back as some sort of, if somehow they connect to Topkapi Palace, that, you know, they use the information of them to escape.
Yeah, surely these tunnels have got to come back into the story, because otherwise it's just this really cool thing that got dropped in the middle but then doesn't go anywhere. So surely it's got to go somewhere. Like there's going to be more of this, I hope.
This is one thing I don't think Gabriel has the information about. And if he does, then he's omnipotent and all-knowing and evil.
He is kind of superhero, but I mean villain.
Super villain.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Speaking of Gabriel,
yeah, fingers crossed.
Speaking of Gabriel as supervillain, I did find this, like, even though I knew it couldn't be this easy, I did find it really scary how much he knows and how much he knew everything that was going on. He knew that Jarrett had found the one kid. He knew Archie's involvement. He was totally on top of everything, and like that definitely was like cementing his ultra powerful supervillain thing in a scary way. Like this is definitely not a D'Aubigny. This is like a supervillain to match and outwit Lymond.
Yeah.
And letting it all happen. I mean, he did tell Lymond specifically, oh, I will let you see your son before I kill you. Like, I'm going to give you that pleasure. And he did.
Yeah, he's like, I've set this whole thing up and it's playing out exactly as I planned.
Yeah, the dominoes are just falling, and like,
so scary.
So scary. And just emphasizing that Lymond has run out of money. Like that.
A lot of money. His health is really wrecked. Like, how is he gonna get out of this one?
Yeah.
What about you, Laura? What were your thoughts, or when you originally read this all those years ago?
Oh God, because I was zooming through it really fast, so I honestly have no idea how you guys are able to stop at this point. Because I was definitely like, oh my God, I don't know what's gonna happen.
It's so hard. Literally, the only way to do it is that I time starting the chapters so that I finish, because I know how fast I read. I finish about 10 minutes before our video chat starts. And so I can't start another chapter. And then by the time we get done with our discussion, it's been enough of a breath that I can be like, okay, I'll wait till next week. So, but yeah, if I did not time this like on purpose to do it this way, there's no way I would just start the next chapter.
Yeah. I think also when I first read it, definitely the part where they go into the underground cisterns, I just remember being like, What is this? And having been to Istanbul and been in those cisterns, I know what it is now. I know what it looks like. I've been in there, but like reading it the first time, I was like, is she making this up? What is this? This is so weird.
Yeah.
And it was just like a little bit of an overload of so much strange historical stuff that I didn't, having not known anything about the history and the, you know, what's actually there. It was definitely like, this book is so weird. What is going on?
I actually saw a documentary on this like years ago. And so when they went down into the cisterns, I was like, oh wait, I remember this. And so I did actually have some images in my head of what this looks like. But yeah, do you have pictures? I'm hoping you have pictures.
I do have pictures, yeah. When we went for the Dunnett event, we actually had dinner in an underground cistern that didn't have water in it. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and then one of the
I'm so jealous of this trip.
And then one of the top tourist attractions in Istanbul is to go into the cistern, and it's one that's full of water and little fish, just like they describe in this. And you can go wander around. It's so cool. I'll show you pictures later.
So cool.
Dee, if you can remember the name of that documentary, let me know. I'd like to watch that.
I have a sneaking suspicion it was like an episode of something or like but if I can find it,
I can just Google it too.
Yeah, if you go to like YouTube and you search for Basilica Cistern, that's what they call the tourist.
Basilica Cistern.
Yeah, I'm sure
I think it was some like 20-minute YouTube thing.
Yeah.
I was probably in a Tomb Raider phase or something, and like
Tomb Raiders.
watching archaeology stuff.
It's very Tomb Raider, isn't it? Yeah, and obviously it's not actually a basilica, but they call it Basilica Cistern because of the architecture that looks like a church, even though it's just
like all the columns, the rows and rows of columns that were built up. It's like this complete underground city almost.
Yeah, so cool. And
it's even ancient when they found it in the 1500s. So
yeah, and the fact that the people that took over the city mostly don't know about it. So it's right under their houses and it's under their well. Some of them are getting water from their wells, and yet they don't realize it's this whole interconnected. Like,
that's so amazing.
So cool, yeah.
I'm assuming they know now, like
yeah,
knows now, right? Yeah,
of course, yeah. Okay, should we dive in?
Sure.
All right, so we start with chapter 22, Constantinople, the Golden Road. And in this, we have the intriguing setup of Gautier buying a house and moving in with Martha and Pierre Gilles, which of course leaves us wondering why, since Pierre Gilles hates them.
Yeah.
But don't worry, we find out soon. Jared helps them move, very nice of him. And he obviously knows they're up to something, but he doesn't know what. And Martha leaves him hanging with a fragment of a nursery rhyme, which later we find out he takes to Lymond, and that's how he figures out what's going on.
Which I looked up, and I got red herringed because I looked up the nursery rhyme, and it talks about like going to the well and the strawberry leaves, blah blah. But then later, further on in the nursery rhyme, it talks about how pretty her face is, and then the man, it's like a woman talking to a man, and the man says, "Well, she says I don't have any money, but I have a pretty face," and he's like, "Well, I can't marry you because you don't have any money," and then she says, "Who asked you to marry?" Like, well, nobody asked you to. And so I thought it was just Martha being like sassy about like, I don't want you.
Aww.
So, yeah.
Seems to be a pretty deliberate clue that she gives Jarrett. And even though she's pretty sure Jarrett can't figure out, which he doesn't, like all he has to do is go to Lymond. So like, I wonder the reasoning for her giving this. Did she want him to figure it out? Did she want him to report back to Lymond? I know she did not know that Jarrett would be able to find Lymond, but he does. And of course he tells them, and Lymond figures it out immediately. So was this a cry for help?
I would say she was being arrogant, and she thinks Jarrett's stupid.
Hmm.
I think she's just trying to like piss him off and have one over on him. And she's so angry. Like she's so angry, and she has so much bitterness that's just festered and festered and festered. And
I hope her and Lymond get a chance to sort of powwow and discuss and figure out their issues. I mean, we've got 2 more books, hoping that they both live through this. I mean, Lymond will. There's 2 more books, but
yeah, Yeah, there's a point later where she says, I keep talking about stuff that hasn't happened yet. There's a point later where she says, well, let's talk about it when we get there, but it's basically she's talking about like what she doesn't like, what he hasn't given her, Lymond, and the implication in the text is like the explicit implication is money, that he hasn't given her money, but I don't actually think that's what she means. Like, I think it's family and belonging, and because she talks about how money will make her be a person. And there's that whole thing, and it's like that's what she really wants is identity and stability, and it's just money's just a way to get that. And I think that's what she's mad about, is that she doesn't have identity and family. And
well, and in the position she's in, money is the way to get to that.
Right.
Yeah, because she's been at the mercy of Gautier and the Dame de Dutance and
yeah, but it's like the money, like the lack of money isn't the problem, it's the lack of what money could bring her, you know. And that if she had been provided those things, then the money wouldn't be an issue. Anyway, that was jumping ahead.
We never do that.
I know, we never do things out of order.
So just I'll just go through like a couple of things I highlighted in this section. One of them is Jarrett is contemplating what is going on with Lymond, and the crudity of his behavior and the perplexing things he's done. And of course, he's about to get his answer with the opium addiction reveal. But
it does show a little bit. I feel like this is a little bit of growth in Jarrett, and then we do see him paying attention a little bit. And then he's saying like, whoa, this isn't like Lymond, something's weird. And that to me is, I mean, that's pretty impressive for Jarrett. He usually does not pick up on these things. So,
and he's actually surprisingly sympathetic to Lymond throughout these chapters, even though he does have his moment of like trying to storm out in typical Jarrett form, and he discovers he's an opium addict. But he's always thinking of him as Francis. He's trying to find him. He's not thinking about leaving anymore, and he really kind of takes seriously what he thinks is Lymond's philosophy and Gilles' philosophy of kind of the greater good and the bigger historical vision versus the personal, which we can talk about later, whether that's right or not. But at least he's stepping outside of his normal Jarrett way of thinking a bit.
Yeah.
I also just really enjoy the, I love the way that she uses Pierre Gilles to evoke the history of the place. And there's this part in 447 where it's talking about Gilles knew, historical things, the Forum of the Bull, and under the plain, the hot baths of Honoria, and the Forum of Theodosius, and there the baths of Achilles, which Justinian making the aqueduct from, blah, blah, blah. And I just love this evocation of the history of the place, because if you go to Istanbul, you do feel all that history. It's such a fascinating place because of it having so much history.
Yeah, I just wanted a slideshow right here of his memory, and like just this place and then this place and then this place, and I just wanted like pictures of like what is he thinking about all these things.
This definitely made me want to go to Istanbul, and I did not regret it. So there's so much there historical, like the archaeological museum is just, everything is a treasure and it's all put together there. And even just like walking around, there's still all these ruins and beautiful things. And then we have actually a hint here on 447 of what we're about to find, where it actually mentions the great underground network of water to the city's cisterns and fountains and baths, that the aqueduct was spraying the water. And they mentioned the aqueduct earlier. So I believe it is the aqueduct of Valens. It takes the water and then brings it into the cisterns. And like, so people knew some of these things, but like Gilles is the one that put it together and was like, oh, those cisterns must still be there. And then very, very Marta at the end of the chapter, she says, who will help me myself? And that's right before she gives the little nursery rhyme. And I like Jarrett's thought where he's like, I don't know the rest of the rhyme. Francis would have known. He's thinking of him as Francis. And he's smart enough to like actually take it to Lymond to get it figured out, which is a very good idea. Any other thoughts on that section?
And in doubt, tell Francis.
Well, he's got to find him first, but he does.
Yeah. I mean, I guess my thoughts on this were the same as what you had, just like Jarrett paying attention a little bit more, and we get a more emphasis on how Giles like hates Marta and her uncle. Jarrett's so confused about like why are they together? Giles hates him, which is a clue of what's going on. And yeah, and then just all the descriptions are really, really beautiful. Yeah, and also like, why did they pick this house? Which I think that, you know, there's Gautier tries to answer that by like, hey, we couldn't really get anything better because we're foreigners, you know. But there's still a little bit of like, what's up with this house, you know? So
yeah, no, it's definitely like, yeah, you're full of crap, Jill. You obviously have a reason for choosing this place.
Right.
Also, I think, I don't know if this helps Jarrett come to his discovery later or not, but the fact that, you know, Gilles, the whole time that they were traveling, was like, he'll be my manservant and do this and do that. And then as soon as they get to the city, he's like, I'll call on you if I need you, but like never does. So
yeah, and he's very grumpy about it. He's like, oh, I don't need you now. But obviously he would rather be like dissecting giraffes and having Jarrett take notes.
Yep.
I also love, oh wait, this might happen later, but I started speaking, but I love how at one point Jarrett like lets her Pesties sit in his lap and starts like petting him. And I was like, oh, you've been annoyed by him this whole time, and now you're like warming up to it.
I noticed that too.
I like how he used her Pesties to trick Marta. Like, wow, Jarrett managed to trick Marta. That is impressive for Jarrett.
Every once in a while, he comes through.
Even a broken clock is right twice a day. All right, so our next section, Lymond continues in the guise of the meta, telling stories, and he's staying at Mikhal's house with Mikhal and these other pilgrims of love who are helping him, and they help him do a bunch of things, including they make an arrangement with a Jewish woman who goes into the seraglio and is able to pass messages. And we find out later she's passing messages with Philippa. Yes, Hepzibah. They also, one of the Pilgrims of Love hangs out around the various menageries and animals in town until they find Archie. And so Lymond gets reconnected with Archie. And then we have Jarrett looking to find Lymond. He goes to the house of the Nightingale dealer where he follows Lymond and Caredon. And he's sort of captured by the Children of Love and taken, or Pilgrim's Love, and taken into Mikhal's house, where he meets Mikhal, who then takes him upstairs to Lymond and Caredon. And like Mikhal reveals that Lymond is an opium addict, but doesn't tell Jarrett that it was not really Lymond's fault. So he
that feels like a key piece of information.
Yeah. And so in a typical form, Jarrett tries to storm out. Lymond stops him because the house is watched. They have a little fight, which scares the poor kid. The kid then gets sent back to the whorehouse, poor kid. And Lymond and Jarrett make up. And basically, the reason why they can't just save Caredon now and they have to send him back is because they have to get all the plans in place to rescue all three of the children. And if they took this one too soon, it would reveal what's going on, which is a pretty horrible ends and means thing, to have to send this child back to the place where he's being abused.
Yeah.
I obviously feel like the most interesting part of this is the look on Lymond's face that Jarrett sees when Lymond doesn't know he's watching.
Yeah. It's just, yeah, it's good. That whole scene with Lymond and Caredon is just so sad, and
like the he finally feels comfortable, Caredon. Like he's just sitting there playing, and like Lymond is, you know, gonked out of his head on opium, just sort of lying back. But like I feel like Caredon feels safe for once in his short existence.
And Lymond is working
until Jarrett breaks in and they fight.
And that's why Lymond is so angry at Jarrett, like absolutely infuriated.
But the crazy thing here is not like I'm not angry at Jared, I'm angry at McCall, because he's the one who like ripped open the curtain and made this big dramatic thing happen. And it's like, he could have just said, hey, I'm gonna take you to Lymond, be warned, you know, he's high on opium because somebody's been feeding it to him for months, and just so you know, that's what you're gonna see, don't freak out, you know. And instead he does this like, you know, and then we turn into this big debacle of nonsense. And like, anyway, it made me, I put like, why did he do this? And it made me kind of a little bit go like, what's going on with McCall, like right there.
Yeah, I feel like this is sort of set up for the betrayal that gets revealed later, because you're like, why did he do this in such a way?
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
I want to read just a little passage here, and I want to talk about what's going on with Lymond here. This is when Kyredin is playing with the shells and Lymond is sitting with him. And Jared is watching, and he sees there was nothing casual about the blue eyes fixed on the downbent blue gaze of the child. Francis Crawford's face in this fleeting moment of privacy was filled with ungovernable feeling, of shock and of pain, and of a desire beyond bearing, the desire of the heart which longs for the water brook and does not know until it sees the pool under the trees for what it has thirsted. What does this tell us about Lymond?
He deeply, deeply, deeply wants to be with his son, and that he didn't actually realize the depth of that longing until now.
Yeah.
That, yeah.
All the times that he like was willing to let the kid die, do you think he still would?
No, I'm not actually convinced he would do it before either. But
he did legitimately, like, you know, kill Gabriel, knowing that would put the kid at mortal risk. And I'm pretty sure at the end of the last book, he was ready to kill Gabriel. If Philippe hadn't intervened, he would have.
Yeah, I think that too.
I think the kill Gabriel part in this book, though, I'm not so sure if it was like, I'm going to kill Gabriel and the baby's going to die. I think it was more, they were locked in this mortal combat, and it was, he can kill me or I can kill him. And if I kill him, there's a chance I can save the kid if I can get there fast enough, you know? So it wasn't, I'm not sure he was even sacrificing the kid now. I think back in Scotland, it was much more of an abstract idea. But once the children become concrete, you know, and become actual people in his head, I don't think once that line passes that he's able to do it.
Well, and once he is bonding with the child. And I think the other thing that's very clear that he's doing here is he recognizes the abuse and the damage the child has suffered, and he's trying to counter it by keeping his voice gentle and by not asking anything of him. And it's just starting to work. And then I think there's also this really important part where he talks to the child who, after Jarrett scares him, is like kind of cowering and pleading with Lymond and saying he's good and offering his kisses. And Lymond says, "Keep thy kisses. Thou art almost a man, and a man chooses to kiss only the persons he loves. Then thy kiss will be a big gift indeed." So Lymond, who has had to sell his body to protect his friends, is teaching the child the opposite. He's teaching the child about, you know, consent, basically, and it just breaks my heart so much.
Well, and just that desperate longing on Karenin's part to be like, you know, I'm good. Like, am I good? I mean, that question, am I good? I'm gonna get a little philosophical here, but I kind of feel like that's a question that, like, all of us long to have answered. Like, am I good? You know, like, am I? And for someone to say, like, you are good, you know, like, it's, you are good, and just to be affirmed. And of course, in this situation, like, he also doesn't want to be punished and he doesn't want to be hurt, and so he's like, I'm being good, you know. But just that Lymond just saying, like, you're good, like, and you don't have to do anything, like, you are good, and just it broke my heart. So, but You know, this is back to the subject of McCall a little bit. I wonder if his treating Jarrett the way he does in this scene is a little bit motivated by jealousy over Lymond, maybe, because we have that scene later where it seems pretty clear that he wants Lymond to love him, and Lymond won't or can't, and they have this conversation about that. Like, I wonder if he's the kind of abruptness of the way that he does this is about trying, maybe not even consciously, but like trying to break something in Jarrett and Lymond's relationship. I don't know.
I can definitely see that implication here. I mean, because we had the moment where Mikal tried to seduce Lymond and it didn't work. And then there's like a callback here to apparently Lymond told Mikal that he needed to meet Jarrett. So you could see Mikal being jealous, and you could also see it not being jealousy, but just being like Mikal, whose whole philosophy of life is driven by this idea of love and pursuit of love, being offended by Lymond refusing to open himself to it.
Yeah.
Although very clearly he loves the child, it's just not a romantic love, it's a parental love.
And he loves the child without being 100% sure that it's actually his, which is also something I love. Like, at this point, I think he loves both of these children equally, even knowing that one of them is, I was going to say, the demon spawn of Gabriel and Jolita, but it's not the child's fault.
It's not the kid. And I think Lymond knows that. And I think Philippa knows that. Like, once she finds out, I think she also will have, even though there's one particular kid that she loves because she knows the kid, I think Philippa will value both of them. And it seems like almost everyone else is just like, we got to figure out which one's Lymond's and the other one can just burn. You know, it's like, no.
Especially Jarrett.
Oh my goodness.
Do you think Lymond bonds with the two of them equally, though?
No, I don't think he's bonded with the two of them equally. I think he's bonded with the one who's with him, just like Philippa's bonded with the one who's with her. But I don't think he necessarily values them unequally.
Right. It's the personal versus the like larger philosophical.
Yeah. I think he puts a value on both of them. But yeah, I think you're right. I think you bond with the one in front of you. So
right, because he hasn't spent any time with Kazakoyim except for the like 5 minutes that he was being beaten by Gabriel in front of him at the palace. It's the only time we've seen him. But Kazakoyim was the first of the two children that he did see. So,
but I do think also it's telling that this child has the same kind of trauma that Lymond has with, like, you know, literally being forced to sell his body, and that Lymond is specifically bonding with him over that experience and trying to like say to the child something that he would never say to himself, like, you know, this isn't your fault, you don't have to do this kind of thing, which, like,
yeah, I think if it ends up that this is Gabriel's son, Lymond is not going to care. Like, he will still be bonded to this kid.
oh, it's so sad.
Yeah, he'll have two sons for the price of one. I hope.
Also quite telling in this is after their little fight and the kid leaves, Jarrett apologizes, which is an unusual thing for Jarrett to do. So that, again, we're talking about Jarrett growing a bit.
Who would have thought? Certainly not me in the last book.
No, you did not want to give him any way.
Not happy with him. I still think he's an idiot, but
well, he is an idiot. But
at least he's got a good heart.
Yeah. He's showing growth of character, and like you said earlier, he's starting to perceive things a little bit better. So
yeah,
I'm interested to see what happens with him for the rest of the book. Jarrett, especially because he's in a position where he's sort of at the end of these 3 chapters, he's the only one that isn't in Gabriel's clutches at the moment. So, like, what?
Jarrett?
Yeah. Like what responsibilities or how is he going to use that to help the situation? We'll see. Like, I don't want to say it's Jarrett to the rescue because I think Lymond's perfectly capable of rescuing himself from his current situation, but
Is he really?
Jarrett might have a big hero moment coming up. So
let's see. Signs are dark. Who knows?
So we have a little bit of a reiteration also of the passageway that, or paragraph, whatever, that we had in Lymond's head where he was thinking about the two children. And here he talks again, this is on 458, about how it's impossible to tell the two apart. And he asks, does it matter? Should it matter which child is which? And I think it's also interesting that he refers to the other child as Philippa's child. Mm-hmm. Why is he thinking of that child that way? Like, what does that tell us?
I think it's probably easier to equate the child with Philippa's name than Gabriel's, because if Corydon is his child, then the other child would be Gabriel's. But instead of thinking of it that way and giving it some sort of negative context, I think he's equating it with Philippa because that negative aspect isn't there.
I mean, true, but also, like, what else would he say? Because they don't know for sure. Like, they can't call him Gabriel's child and they can't call him Jolita's child because they don't know for sure which one is which. So it's the child with Philippa and the child at the Nightingale, you know? So there's that kind of practical aspect of it. But I think you're right. I think it's like associating this child with Philippa again as a way to just, like, this kid has value no matter what his parentage is, he has value.
Right. And the child is loved, which, yeah, I don't know. I mean, you don't have value if you're not loved, but.
Right. It's not that you lose value if you're not loved, but he is loved.
Yeah.
And he's known. Like, somebody knows this kid, and the person who knows him is Philippa.
So also on the topic of Jarrett's personal growth, he even asked, what can I do, like, to help? And Lymond says, do you mean that? Of course, you don't suppose you can do it on your own, said Jarrett. What can I do? Just, aw.
Yeah.
Jarrett always means to help. He just doesn't, even when he's trying to. So
I love that Lymond's next thing, though, is like, at your core, you have no common sense. He says, like, when the clay for thee was needed, as they say, he remarked, they forgot to put in common sense. Which is true.
And also right above that, Lymond apologizes to Jarrett as well. So they're working on this, having a friendly relationship thing, getting better.
Yeah. And Lymond, like, almost explains about the opium thing, but he never quite gets to the point where he says, by the way, I didn't choose this. I'm just kind of like, you're leaving out a key piece of information. But he does say, like, I'm going to keep taking it. Don't worry, I'm not using it to escape my responsibilities and stuff. Oh, by the way, somebody was slipping it to me for months. He never says that.
But you see, this is why I think it's part of his plan. He purposely doesn't say that, because remember when Jarrett found out about Gabriel and then he chose to go back to him, and Lymond was like, Gabriel will know instantly that you know. It's like, you're not going to be able to hide this from him. So, like, Jarrett, he can't hide anything on his face.
So
he went back knowing Onofrian was guilty of any deeds. Onofrian would know right away and would be useless to anybody.
Yeah, you can't tell Gabriel, or you can't tell Jarrett anything that you want to be kept secret. So that is absolutely true.
So I think that, Lymond is using the situation of knowing Onofrian as a traitor to his advantage in this case. We've yet to see how, but I do think it's going to play into the escape plan in some way. So
yeah, I do love this bit where Jarrett says, what can I do to help? And I think it plays into, like, my concept of Jarrett, which I think I've mentioned this before, but like, he needs a leader. Like, he needs someone telling it. So to me, Jarrett is submissive, not in like a weird kinky way or anything like that. That's weird. But everybody do you. But he's submissive in the sense that he needs direction. Like he can't, when he goes off on his own, it's not good. Like it doesn't end up well. But he's good at like following, and he needs that person that he can follow, and that he can, I think Jarrett finds like his identity and comfort in doing what he's told. And I don't mean that in a lesser way, but just that he's good at that, you know, and he can his strengths lie in that, you know, and so I'm hoping that we're getting some of that here.
Yeah, I think his one of his big challenges and like growth opportunities is to learn how to balance that fact that he's a very good like executor of other, like a leader's direction, with the need to think for himself, at least to the extent to question his leader and make his own moral decisions. Because like he threw himself into the Knights of St. John and their leader is corrupt, and then he threw himself into Gabriel and Gabriel is corrupt, and now he's throwing himself to Lymond, but he does seem hopefully to be
a little critical.
Yeah, a little bit critical. Like, well, he's certainly critical of Lymond, but able to balance that out with like following versus questioning, you know, appropriate.
Absolutely. Like he needs a leader. He needs someone to follow, but he also needs to do a good job picking that person. And he's historically has not been great at that. So yeah, I think you're right.
What else? So the shells. The child is playing with shells. Thoughts on that symbolism? Why is he playing with shells?
I mean, how deep do we want to go into it? Like, shells are like the home of something that's died. Like, are we gonna get like, how far do you want to
go? Shell can be a protective barrier.
Yeah.
It's like you said, a home. If you think about it in terms of oysters, the oyster shell holds something very valuable on the inside of it.
Yeah, and it's there. Yeah, I mean, they're beautiful, but they're, you know, they're found.
They're fragile.
They're fragile. They break easily. Yeah.
They're unique. I think every shell is different.
Where do they come from?
Oh, the ocean. And Una is always described as a creature of the sea.
Yeah, I'm just saying, we had the other kid with the peach jam, and now we have this kid with the shells.
Yeah.
Symbolism.
Oh, they're so sad though. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. I feel like the book is definitely telling us that Caredon is Lymond's son, and what is the other one's name?
Kazakoyam.
Yeah, Kazakoyam is Gabriel's son. But we'll see.
All right. Any other thoughts on this section?
This is a small thing. It's almost not even worth mentioning because it's kind of a throwaway because she dies very quickly. But I was trying to figure out if Hepzibah was somebody that we've already met. Because when she first gets introduced, it says, there she encountered at least one face she knew, was given rather too much Greek wine and a great deal of gold. And then that's sort of how she gets this job to sort of give messages back and forth. But, you know, she ends up being caught by Gabriel and being killed almost immediately. So I don't know if it's worth spending too much time on. Any thoughts on that? Not really.
I think I assumed that she knew, that's how she got pulled into the plot, was that she knew somebody already.
Maybe because of her trade, she was familiar with the Pilgrims of Love. So maybe it was McCall. Like I thought maybe it was somebody from Lymond's past at first, but I don't know. Because I mean, I guess it's because they gave her gold, but she seems to do this job pretty willingly, even though it puts her life in danger, literally.
I think this may be one of those, like, it's actually just what's in the text and there's not a hidden meaning.
Yeah.
Somehow one of the pilgrims had known her from somewhere and was able to make contact and like knew that she would be able to access the seraglio and pass messages and would be amenable to bribery.
And it's something I think I'm going to look up when we finish this book, just in case there's spoilers. But I'm wondering if Hepzibah was real, because it sounds like a name that I know, but it may just be like a biblical name. So
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I assumed it was a biblical name. I also just like I like the historical atmosphere that historically Istanbul and Constantinople was a very tolerant place and people of every religion mingled, and there wasn't a lot of like persecution or anything, which is true. Mm-hmm. All right, next section. All right. Philippa is passing info to Lymond via Hepzibah. And the most important information that she passes to Lymond is that she has learned that Roxolana, Rustam Pasha, and Gabriel conspired to trick Suleiman into killing his own son, which we were speculating about last time, and which did happen historically, although I don't think there's actually proof that Roxolana and Rustam Pasha conspired, but it is highly likely. And of course, Gabriel wasn't involved because he's fictional, but the bones of that are all true. And
it's not a surprise.
Yes. And I think like from like a, I don't know, like a sort of a perspective from beyond the book, looking at it from outside and like what happens with the fictional characters, I wonder if Dunnett started with the historical and that inspired then this fictional story, the story of Suleiman and his son and Roxolana.
Yeah, I can see that being like, oh, this is a very fascinating bit of history. Let's weave a Lymond tale around it.
Yeah. Exactly. And like weave the thematic elements through as well, you know, the children and everything.
Yeah.
And the like parents like Gabriel who hurt their own children. Okay, so then Gabriel obviously is pulling strings and he causes Philippa to be banned from Roxolana's apartments and be kept apart mostly from Kazum. And then he calls Philippa to him, threatens to rape her, but doesn't, and reveals to her that there are 2 children and that Hepzibah is dead. Clearly he knew what was going on with the message passing, and it is very scary and it's super traumatic, and Philippa throws up afterward twice and ruins the carpet, which she's glad about.
I like her so much.
I love her, but this is scary, man, when Gabriel threatens her.
This is
absolutely.
Before we get to the Gabriel scene though, I love that there's this list of all these things that she's learning, and like they're super fancy things. Like she's learning to do this amazing embroidery, and she's learning, you know, like how to like put jewels in her hair and like all of these like gorgeous things. And she learned how to pick a lock with a hairpin and how to melt off a seal. So it's like she's learning all of this like sort of courtesan, you know, very cultured woman stuff, plus how to be a spy. Which
it'll come in handy.
Yeah,
it already does come in handy. She uses it to get into Roxolana's quarters later. Or was it now? I forget.
Yeah. And then this whole bit about the revealing the plot with the Rustam Pasha and Gabriel and Roxolana, it at this point I immediately just went, oh, how embedded is Gabriel in Roxolana's power structure, you know, and if the 3 of them, because we suspected Roxolana the whole time of doing this, but if Gabriel is part of this plot as well, like how enmeshed is he? Because that's super, I would imagine it's super risky. Like, wouldn't the Sultan get Like that seems like super risky thing to do if they get caught. So how enmeshed is he in her power structure and her systems, and then what is that going to mean? And scary.
Yeah.
It's such a Gabriel thing to do, to get to manipulate people and then put them in positions where he knows things that could compromise them, and then use that to then get them to do what he wants.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm sure in Gabriel's mind, he's got schemes and schemes, getting himself all the way to the position of the Sultan. Like, that's what he's working on, I think. Like, I don't think third in line is good enough for him. Like, he eventually wants it all. So,
Yeah.
because he deserves it.
Yeah. And I hope, I mean, maybe it's not explicit, but I think the implication here is that this whole plot is Gabriel's idea. That, I mean, obviously historically it would be, but but that like in our story, that Gabriel is the one who is the puppet master behind all of this, and that perhaps Roxolana would never have done this thing without.
Which I think is also important for this story, because we're told Gabriel is the supervillain who could completely like screw up the world if Lymond doesn't stop him. Like the fate of the world is at stake. And so by having him do things like totally wreck the situation in Turkey and get the noble good heir killed so that it's the poor heir squabbling it out instead, like this is an actual historical tragedy. People always wondered, you know, what would have happened to the Ottoman Empire if Mustafa had inherited, because I guess the other three don't do well. So like Gabriel literally is like just barraging through history and screwing stuff up. So Lymond really does need to stop him. And I like the idea of this being, it says the tragedy of Suleiman's father, who had strangled 2 brothers and 5 of his nephews, had been reenacted through no fault of Suleiman's own, but the machinations of Roxolana, his lover and helpmeet. So this idea of tragedy repeating itself, and of the person that you should most be able to trust betraying you and causing the tragedy, is like very, very telling and very sad and thematically relevant.
Yes.
And then we also have Philippa, who is like wishing she could go home, and then like retracts her wish because she's the only person who can take care of Kuzum. She's trying to protect him. She's trying to get Lymond to send her money so she can bribe people to keep the kids safe.
I think also this is another sign of, like we had growth from Jared earlier, and this is a sign of Philippa's growth as well, because we get this sense on 461 where she thinks this is not going to work. Like she thinks, she's like, what in the world is Lymond doing? Like she doesn't see the point, but she continues to do it. Like even though she says like she just doesn't think it's going to work, but she says since Lymond had asked for it, she passed on as much as she knew and waited. And just that idea that she's very skeptical of this, but she continues to do it, and she really follows through. And you know, just you get the sense of like Philippa from 2 years ago would have just been like, this is nonsense, you know, and done something rash, but she doesn't. So
and so then what do you make of her exchange with Gabriel? Like she just barely manages to hold her own with him enough that she isn't entertaining for him, but she's also not a challenge for him, and he lets her go for now.
And that she's well aware of that line that she's trying to walk between not enticing him and not infuriating him. And like, she just wants to be boring. And she literally says, like, there's somewhere where she says, like, she needs to, she must not become a challenge, but she might force him to tire of her. And so like, she just needs to be boring and not interesting. And how is she gonna do this? I also feel like there's an emotional thread that runs over this of Kuzum, and how because at multiple points she thinks of him saying, what is it he says I need to waiting for Phippie, you know, I need to waiting to Phippie. And so she just thinks of him calling out for her. And that is what's on her mind going into this scene with Gabriel. And so it's like there's this tension with Gabriel and this duel. It says she starts out feeling like a mouse that's been caught and like her heart is racing. But then at the end, it's like it's the longest, most adult duel she had ever faced in the whole of her short life. But that thread of this child who needs her is like running through it.
Also, the fact that Philippa held her own with Gabriel, this girl has grown.
Yeah. That moment where it says she began philosophically stilling the shake in her fingers to unfasten the clasp of her outer robe. It's better with music, she said. And it's just like, wow, that's some impressive self-control. And yeah, and reading the room. So
I would love to see this movie if they had a really good, person cast as Philippa, just to see like some of the scenes play out also. Like to see her growing into her own and becoming this amazing person that she becomes.
Because she knows that showing fear or terror is just going to feed him. He's going to get excited and interested by her being afraid. So she's terrified, but doesn't show it. And, so good.
Yep. All right. Any other thoughts on this chapter?
I'm just interested to see what the power struggle between Gabriel and Kiaya Khatun is. Hasn't really shown up yet, but like he tells Philippa at the end to take the message that Hepzibah is dead back to her instead of just sort of doing it himself. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder if is that the motivation that we've been looking for this whole time for her, that Gabriel is infringing on her power structure and she wants to get rid of him. And I mean, I don't know, but is that her motivation? In which case, yay. But I don't know.
Yeah, I'm hoping we'll get an answer in the next section. So
yep, that is an interesting. I love that you pick up on this stuff, Philippe. All right, so chapter 23, Constantinople, the House of Gautier. What happens here is Jarrett goes to Gautier and Marta's house, where he discovers that they're blackmailing Pierre Gilles for the return of his papers in exchange for him taking them down into the cistern, which they get to through the well in the house, and finding for them the hidden treasures of the Hagia Sophia. And the reason that they chose this crappy house is because it has the well, obviously. Jarrett then uses this information to force Marta to go into the seraglio under the guise of fixing the spinet and passing a message to Philippa to help her escape. That is a high-level summary. A lot happens here.
So much.
If we want to go in order, first of all, I just love Jarrett tricking Marta by she says that Gilles is out, and he says without her pesties, and it works even though her pesties is not actually there.
Yep. And I sort of love that, like, Marta comes in all dirty and she's like, you have to leave. It's like, what have you been up to? Mm-hmm. And Jarrett just doesn't fall for it. He's like, nope, something's going on.
Well, it's a really bad lie. She's like, we're a customer and we're going to fix a harpsichord. And I'm like, Marta, you're covered in dirt. Like, I don't think so. You haven't decorated the house at all. Like, something obviously super weird is going on.
Jarrett's not very observant, but that's like, he's enough observant to catch on to something like that.
Yeah. So, yeah. And then we also have Marta giving the big reveal that Lymond has spent all his money. So all he has left is his lands and his company. He is out of his whole fortune. He spent it all on this journey to try to rescue these kids and stop Gabriel. Mm-hmm. What does this tell us about Lymond?
he is dedicated to this, like body and soul.
I mean, it takes you back to that scene in the tent with Dragut, where he had to make the decision that would shape the course of his life, and he's followed that decision through to its conclusion, which is spending his entire fortune to stop Gabriel and now also to save these children. He's a persistent guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, dedicated. Yep. I also loved Marta's response to the thought of Philippa escaping from Topkapi. She's just like, escape from Topkapi? Like, that's bonkers.
That's not gonna work.
Your minds must have rotted.
Aww. So then there is also this just glorious description of the underground cistern, which I'll read, and then when we look at the pictures later, you'll see exactly what this is. He stood in a limnopolis.
Before we get there, though, this is the moment where Marta is talking about like what she wants from Lymond and what Jared assumes. It's at the bottom of 469 before they go into the cistern, and she says no to what he wants. He's like, how much do you want? In italics, by the way, which doesn't happen very often. And then she said, there's this great insufferable anger banked behind those brief words, struck no answering fury from Marta. So he's so mad at her and she is so angry back. Instead, there grew on her face a charming brief words struck no answering fury from Marta. So it says she doesn't get mad, but she's actually, I think, pretty angry. Like she's a pretty bitter person. And so instead there grew on her face a charming lopsided smile, a smile full of irony and small cruel amusements. Like she's mad, she's just not showing it. More than you have, she said. And he said, your brother is rich. He has shown me no sign of it, Marta replied. You know, like he hasn't given her anything. Again, I shall tell you a small interesting fact. So then she reveals that he doesn't have any money. But I just feel like that's not what she wants, is what she reveals later, which is to be her own person and to have like her own identity and security, and she's so mad about that.
I mean, yeah, no, I mean, we can talk more about it. I guess it's kind of throughout this chapter. We can talk about it now. Jarrett thinks of it as kind of petty and kind of ridicules her for it.
Yeah.
But like, I get her. I totally get her. Like,
absolutely.
and Jarrett doesn't have any concept of what life would be like to grow up in this way where you just you have no intrinsic value and you're completely at the mercy of other people who have power over you, and this idea that she doesn't feel like a human being but she wants to. And like this, in the situation she's in, she's making the wrong choices, right? She's not pursuing like love and family. She's pursuing money.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But given the way she was raised, it's almost like, how would she, like, she doesn't know what she doesn't know. Like, she's never had love. She doesn't know how to engage with people.
Right. Why in the world would she throw herself at Lymond's feet and say, please help me, I'm your family? Like, why would she, like, there's no reason for her to do that or to believe that that would absolutely work, even though it would absolutely work. Like, if she just went to Lymond and is like, I'm your sister, please help me, he would definitely help her, you know? But there's no reason for her to believe that that's even an option, that that's even possible. And for Jarrett, who is, you know, king of the patriarchy, I mean, in many ways, you know, he's like wealthy and educated and male and white and like European, you know, like in the European society, he's got all the advantages, and she's illegitimate and female and unconnected to family and doesn't have money, and
he just doesn't get it at all. And it's almost in the same way, like she isn't capable of getting that she's pursuing what she wants the wrong way. He isn't capable of getting why she is the way she is and that it's not her fault.
Yeah. I really, really, really hope that she does not end up to be. She's kind of like a medium light bad guy. Like she's not being helpful here. But I really, really, really don't want her to end up to be an actual bad guy. Like, please let her.
I mean, I guess it depends on like what your definition of a bad guy is, right?
Right. Well, I mean, I just want her to be like reconnected to Lymond. I want them to have some sort of, you know, sibling reunion of some sort, and for her to like find value and find her place. And
I'm interested to go back and reread this book eventually and sort of track all of her decisions and see whether she really is just trying to serve herself or where she's actually helping Lymond and Jarrett along their journey. Or if anytime she's helping, it's all just to get her further along her goal.
Yeah, it's really telling that time when she gave Lymond that talk, don't go to Malta and kill Gabriel, you have to rescue the kid, which seemed like it was for the best, like for the good, is actually because she wanted to go on her journey and do her things, and she keep going. I think also Gilles is in the same position as Jarrett in the sense of the privilege that he has being powerful and male, and he's also judging her. Although I think he kind of has more reason or more, I'm more sympathetic to him judging her because she is holding his papers hostage, which is like less work. But yeah, she does give a very good speech there, where she's like, he can be philosophic, condescend, and forgive. It is easy when you are wealthy and learned and traveled and have a lifetime of achievement behind you. I use my wits because they are all I possess. If they bring me at last what everyone else has denied me, what right have you to condemn us? And I love also, she says, I have spent my life as you have among beautiful things. I know how to care for them. I feel for them as you do, and so does my uncle. These must be sold, but with my share of what they will bring, I can become a person. For the first time, a human being with a life of my own, a home and friends and possessions, and work I may follow in peace and become namely for. And I think it's like, we know that's true because we've had those moments with her before where she was really seeing the magic of these treasures, and she does value the history and she does value the art, but unlike people who already have all these privileges, she also has to consider the trade-off of what it could get her in her life, right?
Yeah, and it could bring her what she longs for, which she's not wrong about that. Like, you know, money can make her life more stable, and you know, can give her a place where she can find a home, and maybe the money won't bring her friends and family, but being stable and having a home is a really good start.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I have a lot of sympathy. So then we also have Gilles talking about the very Indiana Jones. I should like to have seen the pieces studied by scholars and placed together as they have always been in the sanctuary of the church, not competed for and sold to covetous and ignorant collectors, which is interesting in its own right, and also interesting in the way that it inspires Jarrett to start thinking about the bigger picture and not just the individual. And like this transformation that Jarrett's making is like mirrored in Marta and Gilles thinking about the bigger picture and Marta thinking about the immediate and the personal.
Do you know offhand, Laura, if these pieces are legitimate and if they're like in museums somewhere in the world now?
They lost forever, or did they come?
I Googled it once and I couldn't find anything about them. Either I wasn't Googling well enough or they really are lost.
Okay.
I mean, do we know, did they exist at one time? Like, is this a record of things that were in the...
I do not know.
Hagia Sophia?
I'm gonna...
Sounds like stuff that really could have been lost in the sack of Constantinople.
Knowing Dunnett, I am sure she got them from somewhere. Maybe she got them from Gilles' papers even. But I don't know for sure. This is a good question for our commenters if they happen to know.
Anybody know? What's up with these things? Also, it's interesting. When I was reading this description of these things, it's so interesting to me the way that religious objects are venerated, you know, and valued. The particular version of Christianity that I am doesn't really care about objects. Like it's not, we don't like go have things displayed places and go visit them or anything like that. And so it's kind of like, you know, the outfit that Mary wore is like, it's just a dress. We don't care about it. Like it's not important. But at the same time, you can also imagine like the incredible value that has to like, this thing was touched by someone that I revere, and that there's this connection to history and faith through these things. And so it's fascinating, like above and beyond their monetary value of however much silver and however much gold and whatever was there, but just that that connection to like a core of faith is really fascinating to me. Anyway.
We also get the little reveal, which when you go back and reread, you can look for, of what she's been doing this whole time. In Algiers, we obtained what they wanted and wrote to them by pigeon. In Aleppo, I met Sadly and brought the manuscripts and the fragments. So when you go back and you see like Marta with pigeons or whatever, you can figure out what's going on.
And that's the guy she met the night that Jarrett drank all of the liquor, correct?
Think so.
Yeah. Because remember, he woke up and like she was meeting with the leader of the, I forget what they're called, unfortunately.
Yeah. Like there was at least one or two places where she was having conversations with people and we were like, what's that about? And we never knew. And,
oh, the Saracens of Saba.
Yeah. Like they did an attack or something. They were going to do something and they didn't. Something like that.
Yeah.
So she's been blackmailing Gilles this whole time. Her and Gautier.
Which explains why he does not like her. And it's so subtle how it like gets introduced, where like Gilles is like storming in and he's busy like dissecting his giraffe and he's like grumpy about the rude girl. And then you realize like, oh, he's grumpy about the rude girl because she's blackmailing him. He's known her for a while.
Yeah, and it never was explained like why he was warning Jarrett off of Marta and why, you know, it's like don't be around her, you know. We never really knew what that was, but now we do.
Now we know. So yeah, then we have this moment of revelation with Jarrett. There was a desolation in Jarrett's soul, such as all the shifting experiences of his life had never bred in him. He could have wept for them all, and not least for the old and beautiful things, once nourished on incense and prayer and now brooding, conserving their power. Now the spider spins his web in Caesar's palace hall, and the owl keeps watch on the tower of something. So this is his like realization of the scale of history and the insignificance of petty human concerns, I guess. And this is where he thinks how small beside that was Marta's smarting ambition, the old man's rightful disgruntlement, his own silent hurt. I like that he includes himself. The treasure was unimportant except in the one aspect Gilles had detected as a bone between dogs. There was a wider vision he was beginning to see, which Gilles had and which Francis had, pursuing a vendetta which was universal far more than personal, a self-imposed mission to destroy a brilliant and powerful man whose vicious ambition could throw nations into the arena like the beasts of the hippodrome. Jarrett knew then, with his head if not his heart, that in trying to save the children, they had all been wrong. Nothing mattered but Gabriel's death. What do you think? Is he right?
I mean, I think it goes back to his head versus his heart, and not to get all super nerdy, but it's like, you know, do the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one, to quote Star Trek. And it's sometimes the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many, you know. And so it's like, do they sacrifice these children for the sake of the world? And you know, like, do you find eternal happiness on the death of a child, you know, or like that philosophical question of like, you know, would you kill the baby? Like that's, you know, they always ask you at the beginning in philosophy 101, like, you know, would you, or ethics 101, like, would you, you know, find happiness for this group if you have to kill an infant to do it, you know? And I always found that question super annoying. Like, no. You know, and like, and how can you be happy after that? Like that act itself would destroy the good of what you're trying to accomplish. And so, like, do they save the world by killing these children? I mean, how do we measure our ethics but one act and one choice at a time? So I don't know. Yeah.
It's kind of a it's a thorny situation, and obviously the best option is the way of being able to save the children and kill Gabriel, and then you don't have to make the choice.
Yeah.
And I just think it's interesting. Jarrett had to disguise his disgust at a nature so exigent, so governed by intellect, as to be unmoved by the fate of a boy. But then he's having this realization that he was wrong, and the only Lymond was strong enough. Like, so he's having this suddenly, like, the ends do justify the means revelation, which is like the opposite of everything he always thinks, because he's always like the immediate, the emotional. I don't know. I think this is really interesting. I don't know what to think about it. I don't know if he's right. Like, I'm glad he's thinking, but I don't know if he's actually correct about all this. I would be really torn, but
I think
yeah.
Go ahead.
I just say, I think, like, if you're gonna look at it from a cold numbers perspective, like the value of 10 is higher than the value of 2 or something like that, then he's right. But I don't think that's how you should look at it, and I think that he's wrong. But it's still a complicated question, and there's definite there's arguments to be made for abandon the children in Philippa and just but personally I don't think that's the right choice. So yeah. Philippe, what were you gonna say?
I mean, I think it comes down to sort of the stakes for both of these characters. I don't think Jarrett maybe would bat an eye, but like, I think Jarrett would be fine killing Gabriel and losing the children. Whereas if that happened to Lymond, I think he'd be devastated for the rest of his life, especially with the weight of all of the responsibility he's carried and all the people that he feels responsible for, their deaths throughout the series of these books. So for Jarrett, it is an easier question. For Lymond, there's all of this past experience and weight that's lying on him.
Yeah.
It's an incredible burden to bear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a really good point, because Jarrett has this idea that Lymond is super intellectual and not driven by the personal and emotional. But I think we see in that moment where he's with the child that Lymond does feel that just as strongly as anybody else. And it's a huge amount of willpower to try not to let it rule him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, would Jarrett be devastated even if Philippa died? Like, I don't think so. I mean, I think he'd be sort of like sad, kind of, and he'd try to rescue her if he could, but I don't think he would be that upset necessarily if anything happens to her. And certainly not with these two boys. Like, they're so abstract to him. Like, even the one that he's met, they're not, it's not that they're not real people, but he just doesn't have a connection to them.
Well, we've seen that he cares about Kareddin, but only in that he wants to reunite Lymond with his son.
Right.
He even says earlier he doesn't really care about Kazakoyim. He's like, why would we do all of this for Gabriel's child? Where's the sense in that?
And I think if he found out that Kareddin was Gabriel's child, he'd be like, oh, well, never mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
maybe. So he also then, he kind of throughout this sequence, actually, he is very cold and rough and uncaring to Marta. He's planning to send her in, risking her life. And he's supposedly in love with her. But maybe as part of his whole realization of like the greater good over the personal, he's not letting the fact that he's in love with her in any way inform the way he treats her, which is really like rude and rough. And then he she's quite cold, and then he smacks her in the face. And even earlier, he like breaks in and throws her around. So he is like super violent with her. Oh, and then he calls her, you avaricious little slut.
Yeah. I mean, I question a little bit, like when we say in love with her, like, what do we mean by that? You know, Jared's in love with Marta. What does that mean? You know, because he's not in love with her in the sense that he knows her deeply and he cares about like all the parts of her that he knows so well and all that, because he doesn't know her. And he's kind of obsessed with her. He definitely thinks she's physically attractive. Like it mentions several times. There's even a point, I think, in this scene where like the way that she looks impacts him deeply. So he's physically attracted to her. He's kind of obsessed with her. I think he admires parts of her. Like there are things that she does that he finds admirable and things he doesn't. But I think he's also deeply hurt by her. He's embarrassed. She embarrassed him on multiple occasions. He's mad about that. He, you know, so it's kind of like, is he in love with her or is he just drawn to her for some reason and she's not doing what he wants her to do and he doesn't know how to handle that? And
yeah. Well, yeah, and I mean, she keeps claiming, and not entirely wrong, probably, that he's not in love with her. He just wants her because she resembles Lymond physically.
I think it speaks to a pretty big flaw in Jared's character that we've seen over and over again. He's not in love with Marta specifically. He's in love with the idea in his head that he has of Marta, just like he was in love with his ideal of Gabriel, just like he's in love with his ideal of Lymond. The things that he thinks about these people in his head aren't the actual people themselves.
He's sort of idealizes people, right? And then demonizes them, which is like the opposite of idealism.
I really wonder what Elizabeth was like. Was that her name?
Oh yeah, I think that was her name.
It's like I want to know more about her.
I like that it has this implication that she actually just like was this random girl and wasn't anything special, and he's just built her in his mind as this like goddess.
I mean, that's kind of what I'm curious about. Like, is it because she died and he couldn't have her that she turns into this like superhuman woman that he longs for forever, you know, or whatever?
Yeah. So then their final exchange, I think, is very telling. You know, she really calls him out. You know, so this is true love. And she says, what use to you, any of you, meaning men, is a mind and a soul when all you need is a body? And Jarrett replies, I would have foregone even the body for the sake of the mind, and I would have claimed neither body nor mind had I discovered a soul.
This is the line that made me go, okay, like I felt so bad for Jared in this moment, and also kind of admired him as well. Like this was the line that made me think, okay, maybe he does actually care about her a little bit more, you know, that he's saying or at least he's saying, I wish I had found in you what I wanted, you know, what I was hoping to find. And he didn't find in her a soul, or she didn't show him the parts of her that he wanted her to show him. Did that make sense? I got lost in that sentence for a second. But she did not reveal to him her soul, and he wished that she had. So.
Of course, how could she when she has every reason to be to have all her walls up, and she probably doesn't even know how to let her walls down at this point.
Yeah, no, she's completely understandable. Like the reason that she behaves towards Jared the way she does, even though she's super cruel to him, it completely makes sense. It's very grounded in her character and who she is.
Yeah. Okay, I am going to read this passage about the Basilica Cistern, and I'll show you pictures of it while I read it to make it more entertaining here.
What page is the passage on?
473, near the bottom. So here it is. I'll show you my own pictures later. These are just Google, but look at this.
Right? Can you imagine stumbling upon this?
Yeah. right? Because now you go in, you know it's a tourist attraction, you know you're going to see something cool, but like this is literally just like under like a bunch of people's houses. This is there's like a little touristy entrance right near the hippodrome, and you go down, and this is what's down there. And yeah, like I was saying, that we also like ate in a restaurant. That was another kind of section of this that didn't have any water. There's also okay.
Doesn't look incredibly deep.
No, it's very shallow. And I don't know if you can tell there, but there's little fish. I have a picture where I caught the little fish. And yeah, now they have these are like built in for the tourists where you can walk through it and look down.
Oh, you're kind of elevated closer to the
Yeah. Yeah. So you're like walking over the water. So that way you can walk through it. And then they also have these, some of the pillars are held up by these Medusa heads, which the theory is just that as they were building this, it was basically they were just taking like some junk that they had handy to like prop up these shorter pillars, because the whole thing was underground. It wasn't meant to be seen. Yeah, so it's upside down. So they just were using it to prop up the pillar, and they weren't thinking about like the aesthetics of it. The whole thing was like functional. It wasn't intended to be beautiful the way that it obviously is. Yeah,
so beautiful.
I know. It's just so amazing. And here's one of the pillars that has these carvings on it.
So like, were the pillars carved for the thing? Because they seem super beautiful. Or were
they were just like taking like spare like random pillars. Here's another Medusa head, this one sideways. I think they just literally like it was not intended to be seen. And it's just like random stuff. Yeah. And there you can see the top, like the brickwork.
No, this is bringing back memories, and you guys are going to think this is silly, but there's a video game series called Assassin's Creed. And one of them takes place in Constantinople, and there's a whole level that's in these cisterns that, you know, I'm just having flashbacks of now. I played this game years ago, but like, I didn't realize that that was a thing.
Here you can see how the tourists like can go in. Okay, so I'll read Dunnett's description of it. He stood in a limnophilous palace of marble whose faint columns, rank upon rank, marked the darkness like runes, and upheld with their ghostly carved capitals the winged vaults of the ceilings, which spread, mottled with moisture, far over his head. Its carpet was water, water which ran green and icy and clear under his feet, and licked and floated and sucked at the white marble pillars in their dim and motionless rows, a forest rooted in foam. A forest 1,000 years old, built by Justinian as part of the vision by which his New Jerusalem would flower with springs and fountains and blossom, by which, conducted by pipe and conduit and aqueduct, the sweet waters flowed from the hills to the cisterns lying like this one, sunk under the city. Some were known and still used. Some were shattered by earthquake and lay exposed to the air, deep green basins transformed into gardens or sunken alleys for workshops. Some, like this, had remained secret and safe while the buildings overhead crumbled and wasted, and the trapdoors were forgotten where men in the upper air once drew their clear water from the great man-made cavern below. Or perhaps those who still lived there thought it merely a well and lowered and raised their buckets in ignorance. How cool is that?
So cool.
She describes it really well. And it's so atmospheric, and it would be cool to see it like without all the lights and just have it be like really the darkness that you're exploring was just like a little lantern.
It's amazing that with all the weight of all the buildings on top of it, like more of these haven't like collapsed. Just shows how amazing architecture was.
Yeah.
All those years ago, you know?
Well, I think that's why so much Roman stuff is still around, right? They knew how to build arches and build things to stay.
They knew their geometry.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, but I love this whole idea like this culture is gone and yet their monuments remain. You know? And also just the way,
their monumental trash remains. Like they're just it's crazy.
Well, and also the place where they're hiding the treasure is like a sunken Roman house with a mural on the floor that's still preserved. And you see those, I mean, in museums now you see them. I did not go to Pompeii, which I really wish I had, but you can see them there, I believe.
Yeah, all the tesserae and mosaics on the floor. It's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. All right, so then the very end of this chapter is quite quick. It's Marta goes in, she passes the message to Philippa, she fixes the spinet, but she is kept prisoner in Topkapi.
Yes.
Any thoughts on that?
So Gabriel obviously knew what was going on. That's about all. Should be a pretty clear indicator of what's about to happen in the next chapter.
I mean, it's like, whoops. It's not a good sign.
I mean, definitely the fact that he gets Hepzibah killed and he keeps Marta a prisoner tells us that he is ahead of a lot of what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, if the fact that she goes into here to give Philippa all this information and then she gets captured, it's like, oh, yeah, this is not gonna work. And then the plan goes off so easily. Like, oh, not gonna work.
The part I found really moving here is the part of all those who had set out on the Dauphinate, Philippa's lot had been the most solitary and the separation from her own kind now very long. Her brown eyes were waterlogged, frowning to keep back the tears at the first sight of Marta. But the blue answering gaze was unsmiling and even in a curious way angry. So this idea that Philippa, and it just really hit me, like she has been alone for so long. She's been without anyone of her own culture. She's been responsible for this child by herself, like in a culture where she does the wrong thing and she could be killed. And so she sees a familiar face and she's overwhelmed with emotion and she's really grateful to Marta. And Marta's like, I'm being forced to be here. I'm not here to help you. Like, I'm helping you against my will. But it doesn't, I don't think it changes like the emotion that Philippa would be feeling just to see a familiar face finally. And they did get on well, actually, when they were on the boat in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, just the tangible reminder to Philippa that people who know her are nearby, that she's not been abandoned.
In the same way she was crying when she saw the Lymond ship come in, right? Like, these are the only signs she's had. And the exchange with Hepzibah that, that she's not just left behind. And yeah, it must be really moving to realize that he actually is planning to save her and not just the child. I mean, of course, but she doesn't know.
Yeah. And I mean, in the dark night of the soul, like how abandoned she must feel, not to have any input, that if they're all killed or if they leave her there, like she won't know, she doesn't get any news from the outside. So yeah, like she would just be there forever with no knowledge of what happened. And
poor Philippa. All right, any other thoughts on this chapter? So we move on to chapter 24, Constantinople, the House of Jubrail Pasha. So the first two sections here, the escape and rescue plan is proceeding, and we have these sort of little messages being passed where the plan is to proceed. And we know that Lymond, Jarrett, and Archie are all involved. Jarrett goes to Seraglio with Onofrion to get Marta. Kairedin is smuggled out of the Nightingale dealers. Philippa and Kuzum are smuggled out by Archie in a leopard's cage. And Lymond says goodbye to Mikal and gives him a lock of his hair and prepares to go to Gabriel's house. That is the first two sections. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it was fun to just watch this sort of ramp up. It's kind of in a sort of Ocean's 11 kind of way, like you just sort of see the plan play out and all the pieces come together and all that. And it's a fun caper section,
Yeah.
I'm a little bit, when I was reading this, I was a little bit concerned that they weren't more concerned that Marta hadn't come back from the Seraglio. It's like, shouldn't everyone be panicking about that? But,
I mean, Marta's not wrong that they don't really care that much about her.
I mean, not panicking about her in the sense they're worried about her, panicking in the sense that she knew the plan.
Oh, yeah.
Because she had to tell Philippa the plan. So if she's captured, then probably their plan is blown. But they don't seem to be too concerned about that.
Well, there is a part somewhere in here where Jared is weighing like which is more powerful, her greed or her vengeance. Yeah. There's an interesting bit in here actually where so this is when Lymond is in disguise as the Meta and he's in the Hippodrome, and it's describing the Hippodrome, and it mentions the chariot of Lipsippus with its 4 golden horses had stood on the imperial box until the Fourth Crusade, when the Venetians had taken and placed it in their own church of St. Mark's. So this is true. If you go to the Hippodrome, these horses are missing. And if you go to Venice and you go to St. Mark's, the horses are there. And they were stolen by Crusaders from Constantinople when it was still Christian. So the Christians crusaded over and stole the horses from other Christians and brought them back to Venice. And I'll show you a picture just because I thought this was really fascinating when I went to Venice and I saw them up there. Those are actually a replica now. I think the real ones are in a museum. But I was like, oh my God, those are the horses. My parents were like, what are you talking about?
Like, oh my gosh, like stop looting other cultures, people. The amount of just absconding with treasures that.
Yeah. I forget the exact story, but it was like, you know, the Crusaders were like really ready for some treasure and they didn't care who they took it from at that point.
Right. Yeah, because they probably were on the crusade, not for any, like, you know, noble reason, but just like they were promised gold and whatever. You can sack whatever cities and then, wait, we're going to a Christian city. Oh, well, you can sack it anyway.
So then also there's this whole description of the Hippodrome, which is cool because this is like, if you go to a symbol, this is like kind of the most touristy area where like it's still like this. They mention all the vendors selling stuff. I remember I bought like a pomegranate juice there last time I was there. And there's a description in the center in a straggling line. There remained also what was left of the treasures brought to Byzantium from Greece and Asia Minor and all over the civilized world. The obelisk from Karnak, set up by Theodosius on its plinth of deep bas relief, was now nearly 3,000 years old, its hieroglyphics still sharp and clear. Near it, the column of Constantine still showed the marks where its plates of gilt bronze had been pinned, and between them, 20 feet high, were the 3 coiled bronze snakes from the Temple of Delphi, whose heads had once held the great golden tripod and vase before the shrine 2,000 years earlier. A century before, on another site, water, wine, and milk had flowed from the 3 serpent heads, which now gaped at the winter skies, broken and dry. So this is all still there, actually. I'll show you pictures.
I sort of love that it's like the horses were stolen from them, but they had stolen these snake heads from somewhere else. It's like, we're all just looting everywhere and bringing it to our place, and then somebody else loots us.
So there's the Egyptian obelisk, and there is the whatever it's called, the other one, the column of Constantine, and I don't know about the 3 bronze. Oh, here's the 3 bronze snakes with their heads missing. See?
Oh yeah.
And this is all this like open area like this now, but you can still see that the shape of it's like a square. Well, it's like an oval, is shaped like this hippodrome looking thing. Like that, right? And all that's left is just kind of the layout of the ground.
And that was Topkapi right next to it, right?
It's really close by, and like Hagia Sophia is right there, Soleimani Mosque is right there, Gabriel's house is on there, it's still there.
This is where chariot races would happen and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, oh here, look how pretty, there's the little snakes. I have some of my own pictures to show at the end, but these are the overview.
Cool.
I just had so much fun going to these places with the book and being like, oh, there's that. We also have, I like this reference to the storyteller Lymond. He's telling ancient tales as well as new ones of his own, which, like the silk moth, he spun strand by strand without effort, filled with delicate wonders. We had those silk moths earlier associated with Khaireddin, and I feel like this is another tie between Lymond and Khaireddin. Very subtle, but there. And And then I just love the thought line, or Jarrett has afterward, a man then of poetic imagination, but could one reconcile that, thought Jarrett Blythe, on the edge of the crowd, with a man who could kill as Lymond had killed in Algiers, who could plan and act without mercy? I mean, isn't that just like the sort of core struggle of Lymond, this poetic imagination versus this like practical mercenary? And like this sort of core struggle of like, which one is he going to be and who is he really in his heart? And I feel like from the first book, we feel like the man of poetic imagination is the true Lymond, but is that always going to be true? If he acts as a mercenary for so long, is he going to lose that poetic imagination, like he's losing his music maybe, and just become the cold mercenary?
It is a good question. Will he hold on to his heart?
Yeah, can he through all this? I've talked too much. You guys say something.
Yeah, I think I just enjoyed this, like the rescue and the, again, like it's just a caper, and you know, it was well written, and you're kind of like, she wrote it enough. I was suspicious about like, this is too easy, it's going too well, and you know, but at the same time there was a feeling of tension and like, oh, are they going to get caught in, especially in the Philippa Kadum section where they're hiding in the blanket, the leopard, and you know, like, is the leopard going to kill her or whatever. And so there was definitely some tension in there, and Dunnett wrote it in a way that I was definitely caught up in the story, even though at the same time I'm like, this is going too well. But yeah, and then when we get to, so for all of that capery stuff, it was just kind of like a fun read.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get to the end of this section and it all comes crashing down, and
I didn't summarize that part yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, what did you make of the line Jarrett says, the world is full of people who might have wanted to meet Francis Crawford and who are going to be disappointed?
Let me pull it up. Did I write something there? What page is that on?
491. It's in, he's talking to Pierre Gilles, and Pierre says, I would like to meet your friend, Mr. Crawford. And he says that.
I think that people have these lofty expectations of who Lymond is. And Jarrett has sort of gotten to see what he thinks is the real Lymond, and it's not entirely what the reputation says, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There's two ways to read this sentence, I think. Whereas one is that they're going to be disappointed because they won't meet him. So like, he's going to die or be unavailable, and there's all these people who want to meet him and they'll never meet him and they'll be disappointed. Or there's all these people who want to meet Francis Crawford and they'll meet him and be disappointed.
Meet Lymond and they'll never get to the Francis Crawford underneath.
Right. And so I actually think it's more interesting to read it the second way. But it is interesting that he says, you know, the world is full of people who might have wanted to meet Francis Crawford and who are going to be disappointed. So among other things, Marta has to be expendable. And that he goes right into that, which is, interesting.
Well, and this is where Gilles says, he has forced you to think, has he, that friend of yours? So here's Jarrett this is him seeing the big picture and putting it ahead of Marta, who he supposedly loves, and Gilles seeing that.
Yeah, and they're kind of talking about like, would being captured be like appropriate punishment for the things that she's done, and Jarrett kind of like, I feel like he kind of cops out a little bit because he says, I'm another's, I'm not my own, and what I think doesn't matter. And then they say like, oh, then Jill says, oh, I'd like to meet your Mr. Crawford. So obviously the fact that Jarrett belongs to Francis is widely known.
Well, and also it's just so telling that like he claims he's in love with Marta, but she's not wrong. Like his loyalty is not to her, it's to Lymond.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, and then up and right after that is where Herpestes jumps on his lap and Jarrett strokes him.
Yay! He likes him now.
Yeah, and just that Jarrett also acknowledges that like Lymond has made him think, and he says, yeah, you and he between you, meaning like both Lymond and Giles have made him think.
Yeah.
And or Gil, however you say his name. Yeah, and then I thought this was interesting where it says it seemed like virtue rewarded when a day later, blah blah blah, and they get into this plan, and that seemed like really caught my attention because it's kind of like, oh, maybe not. So anytime there's this language of like something seems like something, it makes me feel like, oh, it's not that thing. Like whatever it is that's seeming to happen isn't what's happening. And that was true.
Yes. So also at the end of this chapter is this interesting exchange with Mikal. And so we have also a hint of how long Lymond has been addicted to opium, and this suggests it's been ever since Malta. This is on 499. Since he could order the measure for himself, Lymond was no longer vulnerable to the violent changes in mood and in temper, which had made him a tormenting companion ever since Malta. Mm-hmm. And then we also have some of the impacts of the opium addiction, in particular, the restless sleep full of turbulent dreams. Mm-hmm. And then Mikal and Lymond have the exchange, and Mikal says, what I desire, thou dost not possess for thyself. How canst thou render it then to another? What do you guys make of that?
I read it as Mikal saying, you don't love yourself, and so how can you love anyone else?
You don't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love someone else?
Yeah, which I think is kind of true. Like, because we know Lymond doesn't, like, his self-image is in the basement, you know, and so he doesn't think he's worthy. And yeah.
And his response is, I have madness in many forms, but that which springs from the passions of the heart is not in my nature. That is all. We are all fashioned differently. Claiming he is incapable of falling in love, which would argue that he didn't feel passion for Christian, but could also argue that he was starting to feel it and then she died horribly, and that's why he's cut it off.
Yeah, I think he's fooling himself here. Like, I think he wants to think that he's incapable of falling in love, and like he's being incredibly self-protective in this delusion, but that it is not true and that he is capable of this. Because we know he's capable of deep passion. He's capable of deep loyalty to people. He deeply loves people.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen that in a romantic sense since Christian, perhaps, but
we just had the scene with the child where he was feeling this intense love that he didn't realize was what he was going to feel. So the idea that he could feel things that he doesn't realize he's going to feel, like we're already there. We have that.
For sure. Yeah. So I wrote beside when I read this, above this exchange where it's talking about the plan, there's a point where it says Archie would be setting out with them on the long, fast journey home, where bribery had already marked the stages and ensured them protection and shelter and food and blah, blah. Right after the side, I wrote, does Gabriel know? ? Because the idea that they've been bribing people, like the more people you let into a plan, the more like the plan's gonna fall apart. And so the fact that they've like set out this route home and stuff, I was like, oh wait, no way, like somebody talked at some point. And sure enough.
Yeah, I think it's not surprising that Gabriel would be on top of it. Come on.
Not at all.
Also, the last thing that happens is Mikal wants to take a lock of his hair as thank you and takes it. What did you make of that?
Like, why? I mean,
And what's he gonna do with it? Anything?
yeah, are we like collecting souvenirs here? Like, what are you doing? And
Is he a witch? Is he gonna put a spell on Lymond?
yeah, but also Lyman's response to it is interesting, where it's just like people take things from him all the time. You know, like his body as commodity is something we've talked about over and over and over. And so just that Mikhail wants a piece of his hair, and Lyman's response, is it unwelcome? No, said Lyman quickly, it is unwashed, but you may have it all with pleasure if you want it. And he's just like, yeah, you can just have my hair, you know? Like he doesn't
I feel like it also like kind of thematically or whatever imagery wise goes back to the experience right after the Agamora where he cut off his hair because that guy was like obviously into his longish hair. So this idea of just still seeing himself, like you're saying, as a just tool to be used, and his body is just another tool, and it's just a thing, and he doesn't care. And then meanwhile, of course, he's telling Kyretta in the opposite. He has enough insight to tell the child this isn't right, but he can't see it in himself. He thinks he's already too corrupted to be worthy or whatever. All right, any other thoughts on those two sections before we move on to the last one? All right, so Lymond sneaks into Gabriel's house and waits for him, goes through his stuff, but he gets caught by Gabriel's men, or they see him, he escapes. There's this whole chase sequence through the bazaar, which I kind of feel like she put in there just to make sure we saw all the sights of Istanbul. He then goes back to Mikal's house where Gabriel is waiting. Oh my God.
Surprise! We're not.
Yeah. And we have, it surprised me. I was scared. So we have Mikal saying he betrayed Lymond because Lymond didn't return his love. And then not only is Lymond caught, but Philippa and Kuzum are brought in. And Gabriel beats Lymond up in front of them and kind of like torments him with opium. And also reveals that the other child has also been caught along with Archie, and they're all back at Topkapi, and then knocks Lymond out and takes them back to Topkapi, where now everyone except Jared is captured, and it's really scary. Or maybe Jared is captured too, since he did go.
I just say, do we know that Jared is free? Like, where is Jared at the end of this chapter? I wasn't clear.
Yeah, we left Jared and Onofrian going into Topkapi. So it could be that they are also captured and everyone is captured.
Yeah, I assumed that Jared was captured because he's with Onofrian. And I assumed that Onofrian was going to betray him in Topkapi. So yeah, so Philippe, when you earlier said Jared's the only one who's free, I was like, wait a second, no, he's not. He's in Topkapi with Onofrian. Like,
yeah, I didn't remember that that's where Jared ended up. So my mistake. Sorry about that. He could still be free, but
to, you know, varying definitions of freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, all the main players are in Topkapi, whether imprisoned or not. We'll find out.
Yeah, and you know, is there a sense of like there's a plan B with all of this? Maybe.
Lymond usually has a plan B and a plan C and a plan D, right?
Hopefully.
Yeah, but he's high on opium, so has he thought that far in advance?
I mean, it does say the opium like makes him able to think creatively. Like there was a whole point where it emphasized his like ability to focus and think creatively. Like that doesn't mean.
I don't think that opium helped him with it though. I think it just didn't stop it because he could
doesn't.
I forget what the line was, but
doesn't Gabriel destroy his supply? So like he'll be going through withdrawal soon, which certainly is no state to try and escape under. I don't know.
And Mikhail was the one that's supplying him, so that's out the window.
So a bit of logistics, because I'm going to show pictures of this later. Gabriel's house is overlooking the Hippodrome, And Lymond, who's been telling stories in the Hippodrome, has been staking out the place. And so that's how he knows all the goings on. And he climbs up on a wooden balcony on the side of the house.
Well, hello.
Hello,
And this is River. Hi, River. So he finds in the house a woman's scent and a pretty trinket made in the form of a tassel of seed pearls. It's not studded with rubies. And it's an earring. Who is the woman who left her scent and her earring? Do we know?
I mean, from the women that we know in the story, the only one we know that's sort of like on Gabriel's side is Roxolana, but that seems super unlikely.
It is very unlikely that Roxolana.
Yeah,
Is
very
she about to leave the palace?
Yeah, no way. And I really hope it's not what's her name?
Kiaya?
Kiaya, yeah. Unless maybe she's doing something to double cross Gabriel. I don't know. I hope she's not in league with him.
Maybe you want to go back and look for who has the earrings of seed pearls and rubies.
I did not pay attention
To look for.
Just tell us who has the earrings. I don't remember.
It's Gazelle.
Okay.
It is, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, all right. So Lymond knows, right? Because he takes the earring. If she was wearing it around him, he would know that was her.
Yeah, it is telling that he finds it. He takes the earring. He's obviously putting together stuff in his Lymond mind.
Yeah. What was he? So he's looking for paper in Gabriel's apartment that he doesn't find.
I assume because he knows from Philippa that Gabriel was part of the plot to get Suleiman to kill his son, that he's looking for more evidence.
Evidence of that.
Yeah. Some sort of correspondence between them.
Yeah, because it's something he could use against Gabriel, obviously. Also really telling, because we're in Lymond's point of view here, we do see the effect of the opium on him, where it says inactivity was trying. He found his mind slipping too easily from its shackles, drifting off into a limbo of fantasy until shocked awake by the shift of his weight on the beam, which is just so not like Lymond. And then he's also thinking the worst that could happen to Gabriel is death. The worst that could happen to himself is to be deprived of opium. But there was a simple way out of that. What does he mean by that?
Like, death would be the simplest way out of that.
Lymond and his old suicidal impulses. So I didn't make any notes on the chase sequence because I felt like it was all just action and scenery and literally just an excuse to take us through another of the touristy parts of Istanbul.
The covered bazaar.
Yeah. But obviously it's just a wonderful, well-written action sequence. And then it's so scary when Gabriel is there back in the house where you take a breath, you're like, oh, he made it back safely, he got away. And then it's like, oh my God, the monster is there. You know, the phone call is coming from inside the house. And that it's Mikhal's friends, the people that have been helping him, that also help capture him and disarm him. And so like, it's this huge betrayal.
Yeah, and that line where he says, like, Lymond said, Mikhail, again in italics, and then was silent, his face very white, and just, oh.
And that's when Philippa and Kuzum show up. That's the biggest reaction that Lymond has. Like, himself is not such a big deal. Them is a really big deal.
Yeah, he thought he got them out of this.
Right.
And then the way that he is trying to reassure Philippa, because he can tell that she's afraid of the changes in him. And so he starts telling her not to worry. And then Gabriel just hits him and like just completely belittles him as like an opium addict. And then like pulls out the opium and like mocks him with it. But I love Philippa, who wants to help, and the only thing she can think of to help is to drop Kuzum, which creates a distraction so that Lymond can knock the opium on the ground. And Gabriel makes a promise here: I shall sink my anvil further into the flesh of your heart. I shall install my forge in a deeper place.
You don't think he's already in a pretty deep place? I mean, come on, Gabriel.
We also have this So Gabriel line where he's trying to like force feed him the opium, and he's like, you won't take a little, then have it all, my sorry hungering slut, which is just continuing the super sexual undertones of their creepy sadistic relationship on Gabriel's part.
Yeah. I mean, this all goes back to Gabriel not being able to have Lymond. Like Lymond not falling at his feet and not being able to possess this man.
And like, why are you, of all the people that fell at my feet, why are you the only one that didn't? Yeah, I feel like there's definitely like a want. It's obviously a completely selfish want, but there's a want.
Oh yeah, and an obsession with like a toddler who can't have a toy, you know, like this obsession with the thing that he can't have. And Lymond is a thing, like Lymond is an object to Gabriel, an object that he wants to possess and can't.
And Gabriel also has this line, which just, I highlighted it because it hits at Lymond's deepest fear, and Gabriel knows him well enough to know it. You know, he tells him that Archie and the other child are also in the Seraglio. You may even recognize others of those you have dragged to their damnation through your insufferable conceit. So this idea that you've gotten all your friends killed, which is his like super trauma. Remember, he tried to like disengage from the world in the second book because he was so traumatized by losing people that he felt responsible for. And here it's like, you've gotten everyone who cares about you and everyone who's helped you. You got all your friends killed. Good job. Thoughts on any other thoughts on this section?
Well, I thought so. I was curious before when Lymond and Corydon were together. She has a line for both of them where it talks about saying goodbye to the dark or saying goodnight to the dark. There's something about that.
Yeah.
And this chapter ends with it says, then she too felt sick and too weary to cry. She sat silent and wide-eyed by the barred window and waited for dawn. And so we have these images of like night and darkness and light. And I'm just curious about, I don't know, I was curious about what was going on with Lymond and his son, we assume.
The say goodnight to the dark line.
Saying goodnight to the dark, yeah. And then, so now we have waiting for the dawn. Will it come?
I sort of took that line in this context as Lymond and the child have both had these very dark, awful lives. And say goodnight to the dark is like, this darkness will end and there will be like a better future. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's in this really dark context where like Michal is bringing this child back to this whorehouse where he's being abused. So it's not really...
You're not really saying goodbye to the dark.
No, but it is on the horizon that he'll be rescued. But
and then this moment at the end of this chapter where it's like they're waiting for the dawn, which normally you would think the dawn is a sign of like renewal and, you know, the light is coming and it's good. But in this case, it's like, are we going to have tragedy with the next day? Like, what's going to happen in the next day? Is everyone going to get slaughtered? Are we going to, you know?
Yeah, the dawn is just the next step in Gabriel's plan is all it's bringing. Or maybe not. Maybe Lymond has a plan B.
I hope.
I really hope.
I mean, they got to get out of this somehow.
And the problem is Gabriel will also have a plan B.
Yeah.
I mean, who are the players who are still at large? If we assume that Jarrett is captured, which, or at least he's somewhat incapacitated if he's with an Offrian inside Tough Copy, who is still at large? We've got
Gilles and Gautier.
Yeah.
I don't trust Gautier to care.
I don't really trust either of them to care about anything other than the treasure and the cistern.
Kiaya Khatoun, wherever she is, but she's probably in the palace anyway.
Probably. And so now we know that she's got something going on with Gabriel.
She's either working with him or working against him, which we've known from the beginning, but now this revelation.
I still feel like she's working against him.
I hope so.
I think so. I mean, I will be very disappointed if she isn't.
Yeah.
So she's obviously a powerful player in all of this. Do we have anyone else?
I mean, McCall, but he's shown himself to be completely untrustworthy.
Unless there's some sort of deep, like, triple agent thing going on with him.
But yeah.
I don't
and there's always the chance that Suleiman might show back up.
Oh, that's right. We still haven't seen the Sultan.
No, but I have a feeling that that's a, like, sort of a Deus Ex Machina move if that's what happens. So
we saw him briefly.
Yeah, we saw him briefly.
Yeah.
Roxolana is still around.
Yeah,
Roxolana.
I do not have any faith that she's going to do anything.
No. There's the French ambassador, not de Aramon, but Chesnau, who doesn't seem like he's very reliable. So
no. And de Aramon left, right? He's gone.
Yeah. So it's almost completely up to them to get themselves out of their current situation. It's cool that, like, after all of this sort of different characters doing different things from different viewpoints, they're all gathered now, which means we're in the thick of it. We're at the end here. So
yeah, I do love how she sends them all in these different trajectories, and then she's bringing everybody back together for the climax.
Mm-hmm.
I really, really hope that Archie doesn't die. I feel like if we go with patterns of how often people die and what happens at the end of the story, I feel like there's a really good chance that Archie's gonna get killed, and I really don't want that to happen.
I don't see everybody making it out of this. I just don't.
I don't either, and I don't see Jarrett dying. I don't see Philippe dying.
Jarrett, Philippa, Lymond, and Marta are probably safe.
Probably safe.
Probably.
Like, Marta has a lot more story to tell about it. She's such an interesting dynamic with Lymond. I don't think she's gonna die. Archie's sort of like a character we care about, but could get killed off. Like, I don't know. I'd be sad about that.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids, I really hope the kids live. I'll be super sad.
I hope, but I mean, Lymond's faced one tragedy after another. Yeah. This would, I don't know.
I can see us sort of having like a victory, like a defeat snatched from a victory situation, which is what we had at the end of the last book, where Gabriel was defeated but not killed and ran away, and then we had this like, oh, now we have this horrible fate hanging over us. I could see that happening here, where like the boys survive, but somehow like they rescue one of them but not the other, or both of them are like carried away into depths of the Ottoman Empire or something, or the something happens where they don't die, they're taken out of the situation, but all is not good. I can see. So
I just don't think this book's gonna have a happy ending.
Why?
I mean, there's still 2 more books left, and we've got to set up. I don't know. I don't know why I feel that way. It's just a growing sense of dread that we especially got in that last chapter, when you thought everything was going to be okay, but it really wasn't. So,
I mean, I think things will be resolved at the end of this book, but I'm afraid that they won't be happy happy, that it'll be something sad. And the only thing that I really, really want is for book 6 to end with like some sort of can we please have this entire story end with some sort of like homecoming, family connection, like happiness for Lymond. Like I just need him to like be okay at the end of this 6-book saga. If at the end of book 4 he's not okay, like that's fine. But so who knows?
Any other predictions or things you're hoping for or fearing from the rest of the book?
I just want Guzelle to be helpful and not have been working with Gabriel this whole time, because it just doesn't make sense if that's what's going on. Unless I missed a lot of cues and clues. But
you know, I'm still surprised we haven't seen Dragoot.
It's true.
That's another person who's hanging out there that we haven't. I mean, we haven't seen him the whole book, but
yeah, it feels very unlike Guzelle to be unfaithful to Dragoot.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I think something's going on there. But I think so. That would be sad.
Any other thoughts you want to share?
I mean, I'm excited to read this part, but nervous.
Yeah, because we have 2 more sections till the end?
5 more chapters.
5 more chapters. So we're gonna do 3 chapters next time and then 2 chapters at the end. So I feel like next time it's also gonna be a disaster. Like whatever we read for next week is just gonna be, everything's gonna be horrible. It's gonna end with like darkness, and then we'll have 2 chapters at the end. But I feel like we've got at least 1 more session of horrible things are gonna happen.
Maybe Richard will ride in and save everybody. Yay, Richard! It's not going to happen. But I don't think Richard has any clue of any of this is happening.
I think it's more likely that Sibylla would ride and
save
Richard.
Maybe Dandy Hunter will show up and save
Dandy Hunter!
Dandy Hunter, the true hero of the story.
All right, I have a few more photos to share.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, let's see.
All right. Okay. So these are things that show up in these chapters. So this is at the Hippodrome. You can see the obelisk here, which is mounted on this pillar thing from a different era. I think it's from Constantinople.
Is this the one that's like 3,000 years old?
Yeah, it's an Egyptian obelisk, and she describes it as like the hieroglyphics are just still like perfectly cut, and they are, like, it's not worn at all.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. And then behind it is the Museum of, I think it's called the Museum of Islamic Art, or maybe the Museum of Turkish and Islamic Art, something like that. But that building is actually Gabriel's house, and that's the balcony that Lymond climbs up.
Interesting.
And historically, it was some powerful person's house, but in the book, it's Gabriel's house. And I'll show more of it later. So then here's just a closer view of the obelisk.
Wow.
Very sharply chiseled hieroglyphics.
Yes. And then here it is with this is the 3 bronze snakes with their heads now broken off in front of the obelisk. And I just got a few like pictures of that. And there's Gabriel's house in the background. It's just such a cool thing. And also, interestingly, you see how it goes into the ground? It's because the ground level historically was much lower, and over the centuries, the ground has built up. So these things are actually planted in the ground much like where the old surface area used to be, like 2,000 years ago.
They didn't cover up the snakes, so they kept building a little thing around them to...
I don't know if they kept doing it that way, or if this was like a later excavation that got the bottom, like maybe only the top was showing, and then for the chairs they changed it. I don't know. This, I feel like you just kind of see the shape of how it's still shaped like the Hippodrome, this whole area, which is now this like park area. But this is where the Hippodrome was, and you can see they could run chariot races around the outside. Yeah. This is the little sign on the column of Constantine, which is one of the 3 columns. Here's Gabriel's balcony. This is in the courtyard in Gabriel's house, aka the museum, where we're drinking sherbet, which is not iced, it's just a super sweet liquor.
Looks like it's rose flavored.
Yeah, there was like rose and apricot maybe, or pomegranate, I don't remember.
It sounds delicious.
It's good, but it's so sweet. It's like really cloying.
I'm okay with that. Is there any like good drink that you can add like liquor to it? Like sherbet mixed with vodka or something?
Put some Rocky in it. No, don't.
Oh, I don't know about that.
I'm sure you could add vodka and it would be delicious. This is just more of this courtyard of Gabriel's quote unquote house and his balcony.
By the way, nice hat. Whoever.
Oh yeah, this was whoever I was with on the Lymond tour. I'm sorry, I don't remember.
I like her hat.
Oh, so these were the shoes. They were actually in the Islamic Arts Museum, not in the Topkapi Museum. But remember when Philippa meets the girls for the first time and they're wearing these like high heel shoes? These are the shoes.
Yeah.
That
is also a traditional shoe in China.
This is just more Gabriel's house. This is some of the art inside the museum. It's just really, really gorgeous because they're not allowed to show human figures. There's all these gorgeous like patterns and calligraphy and stuff like that. Just like every imaginable thing. The carpets also with these just amazing.
And you can touch them?
I'm sure you're not supposed to touch them, to be honest.
Oh my goodness, touch the carpets.
Yes. And this is just, you can just sort of see the shape of the house. Now, I don't know how much of it was built up over the centuries and how much is original to Gabriel's time. But this is just more of the house, which of course is the museum now. And then there's like the side view of the balcony.
Oh, they have like a covered walkway. I like that.
Yeah. And then this is the name of the museum properly. Museum of Turkish and Islamic Art. Highly recommended if you ever go to Istanbul. It's right on the Hippodrome.
And it's Gabriel's house.
Yes. Okay, now here is my terribly blurry photo, sorry, from my old phone in 2012 or whatever year. But this is when we were having dinner inside the cistern that's now dried up. So this was one of the underground cisterns, which is now a restaurant that was booked out for the Lymond event. So these are all Lymond fan people eating.
I love that you're like eating by candlelight.
Oh, Lymond fan people.
Yeah, it is so cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah, this was amazing. The only thing was the vegan options were like terrible. So I had like no food, but okay. And then here is the actual basilica cistern with the water. And you can see like that you come down this passageway and then there's a little cafe under there.
Yeah, that kind of takes things away, but that's all right.
It's definitely a very popular tourist thing. And these are just more like just photos of how atmospheric it is. There's Medusa head. There's, you can see the roof and it's like a brick.
Amazing.
It's so cool.
It's just amazing that this is still held up so strong.
Yeah, and this is right under like the Hippodrome, like the touristy part of the city. All around above it is, you know, people going about their day.
Yeah, I mean just the engineering of this.
Yeah, and that it's so beautiful, and it wasn't even built to be looked at. There's a little fish, yeah.
Is there a subway in Istanbul? Or were they not able to because of all sort of the underground? Because I know they have one in Rome, but it was like really hard to make.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like I read an article a few years ago that they've been trying to build more of the subway in the old area, but they keep hitting historical stuff. There's definitely trains, which I think are underground on the Galata side, because I remember I took a train there. That's the side where the embassy is, which wasn't part of the main city in the time of the book.
It's where the tower is, right?
Yeah. But I don't remember if there's one in the old town. I feel like there's not, but I could be wrong. Okay, more cistern. And then here is just a closer view of that like plinth thing that the obelisk is on top of, which I feel like it was something like this is Justinian or Constantine or one of the Byzantine emperors and whatever, but I don't remember. There's like the plaque about the obelisk. There's more Gabriel's house. This is just more of the area. Here's the entry to the Basilica Cistern. What else? More cistern. This is the line to get into the cistern. Highly recommended you buy your ticket online ahead of time and do one of the skip the line tickets, because you just go right in. You don't have to wait in that line. At least when I went in 2016 or whatever.
Note to self.
Yeah.
Lines are not fun.
There's Amy and Cam and Chivy and in the Hippodrome there. Oh, here, this is just funny. I want to show you guys. I was around one of the tourist shops and they had these Knights of St. John on this chess set in Istanbul. And then last thing, I found this one on my Instagram that I thought was a cool picture. Here is me and my friend Amy at the Basilica Cistern. I just thought that was a cool,
Nice.
cool shot.
I love how dramatic the lighting is.
Yeah.
We had fun. It's a really good place to visit, even though such terrible, tragic things happen in the book.
Sad.
All right. Any final thoughts before you wrap?
I can't believe we're only 2 sessions away from the end of this book. Nuts.
I know.
I wonder if we will finish the whole. I wonder if it'll take us a year. It seems like it'll take us about exactly a year to go through this.
Yeah, we started in June. 2 more books. See, we'll see.
I think we're going to go over a year, but we'll see.
We'll see.
Well, thank you so much to everyone for watching.
Bye.
Yeah.